Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because, well, you want to get your head around the big stuff right, but without feeling like you've just wrestled a textbook.
Exactly. No wrestling required.
So today, we're diving straight into something that honestly touches every single one of us, our relationship with time.
hmm And specifically that crazy modern pressure to be endlessly productive.
Yeah, why is it that even when you're ticking things off the list, you can still feel like you're just spinning your wheels, not really getting anywhere important?
It's a huge question. And we've been deep in Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks. Time management for mortals.
Okay.
Now, for you listening, this isn't just another one of those like hyped up guides telling you to squeeze every last second out of your day. Far from it.
Right, it's not about life hacks.
No, it's much more thoughtful. It looks at why those very methods often leave you feeling even more stressed out than before.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So where does he start?
Well, he starts with a number that might just, stop you in your tracks. The average human lifespan is, give or take, 4,000 weeks.
4,000. Wow.
4,000. It sounds like a decent stretch, maybe,
Yeah.
until you really sit with it,
And realize that's kind of it. That's the whole shebang.
pretty much. And what's fascinating here, what I think you'll connect with, is how that number sort of echoes your daily experience.
How so?
Well, how often do you feel that pinch? That feeling of not enough time?
Constantly.
Right, whether it's dodging that tidal wave of notifications or trying to find space for what actually matters to you.
Or just getting to the end of the day feeling like you've been running flat out on a treadmill but haven't actually moved forward on anything significant.
Exactly that feeling. It's that constant, undercurrent of pressure, isn't it?
It really is. And Burkeman brings up a really interesting point about the 2020 lockdowns, something you likely experienced directly.
Ah, yes, that strange time warp.
Totally. Time felt so weird somehow, both speeding up with days just blurring together.
And grinding to a halt, yeah.
Yeah.
Because all those future plans just sort of vanished into thin air.
It was like being stuck in this bizarre, never-ending present moment, as some experts called it.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture for you, that feeling of time being off-kilter really shows how much we normally rely on looking forward,
I'm being constantly active.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To give our time, shape, and purpose. And when all that got disrupted, the finite nature of the here and now became much harder to ignore.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more, starting with what Burkeman calls the productivity trap.
Right, the trap.
You're constantly bombarded with advice, right? How to be more efficient, get more done in less time. We all know the drill.
Oh, yeah. Optimize everything.
But the strange thing, as he points out, is that the harder you push, the more you optimize.
The busier you feel. And often kind of emptier, too.
That's the paradox. So what's going on there?
Well, it's interesting when you dig into the history.
Mm.
The anthropologist Edward T. Hall had this great image of time as an unstoppable conveyor belt. You deal with one task, right? But 10 more immediately appear in its place.
Yep, sounds familiar.
And it feels like trying to be more productive just makes that conveyor belt speed up.
So you're working faster, but the belt's moving faster too.
Precisely. And this relentless pace, well, it can lead straight to burnout.
Which seems to be everywhere now.
Especially, as writer Malcolm Harris describes, among younger adults. He calls them a generation of finely honed tools, just wearing themselves out.
Finely honed tools.
Wow. It's almost the opposite of what people expected, isn't it?
Anyone.
Well, I remember reading that back in 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that within a century,
Yeah.
so around now,
Yeah.
we'd all be working maybe 15 hours a week.
15. Imagine.
And the big challenge, he thought, would be figuring out how to fill all that extra leisure time.
So this raises a key question for you. Why didn't that prediction come true? What happened?
Good question. What does Burkeman say? He suggests it's down to our constantly expanding desires. And, that classic idea of social comparison, keeping up with the Joneses.
Ah, the comparison trap.
It's a cycle that just never ends, does it? As soon as you achieve one thing, there's always something else shimmering on the horizon to strive for.
And this feeling of being constantly busy, it's almost become a status symbol now, hasn't it?
It really has. Which is ironic because for most of history, being wealthy meant not having to work all the time. It meant leisure.
And this busyness is sort of contagious too, isn't it?
Definitely. Because when those at the top are always pushing for more efficiency, it often creates more insecurity and pressure for everyone else down the line.
So you end up feeling like you're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place, like the Red Queen.
Exactly like the Red Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And that, for you, can lead to this nagging sense This feeling that even with all the doing, all the activity,
You're not actually tackling the right things.
yeah, there's this craving for more meaning, a feeling that you're spending your precious time, those finite weeks, on tasks that don't truly resonate with what's important to you.
Which brings us to Burkeman's central point. And it's a bit of a, well, a bombshell maybe.
Go on.
Traditional time management.
Hmm.
It's basically failed you.
Failed you. Strong words.
Yeah. You're chasing this illusion of control, thinking that one day, you'll finally get on top of everything. You'll reach inbox zero.
The promised land.
But the truth is, the inbox will never be empty, the to-do list will never be finished.
And you'll never reach this mythical state of perfect optimization where you're finally ready for the real stuff of life to begin.
It's just not going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift how we're thinking about this for you and maybe consider how our very understanding of time itself has changed over history.
Okay, like how we measure it.
Sort of.
Mm.
Burkeman contrasts modern clock time, this abstract, measurable thing we all live by, ticking away,
Right, seconds, minutes, hours.
with the task orientation of societies before the industrial age. Think about, say, medieval farmers.
Okay, what was their time like?
Well, their days weren't dictated by minutes on a clock. They were shaped by the natural rhythm of the seasons, by planting, by harvesting, by caring for their animals. Task orientation.
Ah, so the work itself defined the time.
Exactly. There wasn't this constant pressure on them to maximize every single moment because their work was tied to these natural cycles, which felt almost, infinite in a way.
And when they did need to describe how long something might take before clocks were everywhere, they used these wonderfully tangible terms, right?
They did, like a miserere while, time it took to recite Psalm 50.
Okay, that's quite specific.
Or maybe slightly less reverently, a pissing while.
Okay, very descriptive, very task-oriented.
Absolutely. But what's fascinating for you to consider is how relatively recent this idea of abstract, measurable clock time actually is.
And how it changes things for us now.
Totally. It creates this underlying anxiety about wasting time because you feel like you're constantly using up this finite, quantifiable resource. Every second counts, or feels like it should.
But Burkeman also introduces this other idea, right? Deep time.
Yes, deep time. Those moments when you feel connected to something much bigger than yourself.
And time seems to,
Yeah.
dissolve, stand still.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Think about when you're completely absorbed in something, maybe out in nature or perhaps in prayer or meditation.
Or just lost in a really good conversation.
Could be. Or like the psychologist Carl Jung experienced in Kenya, feeling this sense of timelessness in the vastness of the savannah. It's like the boundaries between your own sense of self and the wider reality just blur for a moment.
Okay, I think I know that feeling.
And for you, Burkeman argues, embracing your limited time those 4,000 weeks means consciously making choices
Okay, choices about what?
about what to focus on
Yeah.
and, crucially, what to deliberately let go of, what to neglect.
Neglect, that sounds bad.
Well, it's about resisting that urge to keep all your options open forever. Because that, ironically, is often just another way of trying to maintain a feeling of control you don't really have.
Trying to avoid the difficult choices.
Exactly. Which is, when you really stop and think about it, logically impossible for you, right?
How so?
You can't actually do more than you can do. It sounds obvious, but we act like we can.
Right. That overwhelming to-do list, that feeling of not enough hours in the day. It's technically irrational, isn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
You have a finite capacity. And this connects perfectly to Parkinson's law,
Ah, yes, I know this one. Work expands.
to fill the time available for its completion. Classic. But Burkeman takes this further for you.
How?
It doesn't just apply to work tasks. It applies to everything you feel you need to do.
Like housework, errands.
Yep. And as things become more efficient, think about technology or appliances, our standards just rise to meet that efficiency.
Oh, interesting. Like those labor-saving devices for housewives back in the day.
Exactly. They were supposed to give women more free time, but often they just led to higher expectations of cleanliness, more elaborate meals, more tasks filling that supposedly saved time. The work expanded.
So you're kind of left with this existential overwhelm. Is that his term?
It is. The modern world throws this endless, inexhaustible stream of things at you that seem important or worthwhile or just interesting.
Emails, news, social media, opportunities, causes.
All of it, creating this huge, unbridgeable gap between what you want to do or feel you should do and what you realistically can do within those 4,000 weeks.
It's a very different kind of pressure than people faced in earlier times, maybe.
Definitely. Back then, beliefs in an afterlife or maybe a more cyclical view of history offered a different perspective on the inherent limitations of this earthly life. The pressure wasn't quite the same.
Okay, so if we can't do everything, what then? This leads us to facing our finitude, right? And the surprising value of settling.
Yes, settling. It sounds like giving up, maybe. But let's look at it differently. The philosopher Martin Hegland makes this really powerful argument
Which is,
that if your life went on forever, if it was eternal, nothing would truly matter.
explain that.
Well, there'd be no urgency, would there? No real reason for you to make choices about how to spend your time because you'd always have more time, an infinite amount.
Decisions wouldn't have weight.
Exactly. Burkeman even brings up that slightly unsettling, kind of funny question. Heaven, will it be boring?
Huh. Okay, that's a thought-provoking point for you to consider. If nothing ends, does anything truly begin or matter?
Right. And encounters with mortality, or even just thinking about it, often bring this into sharp focus, don't they?
They definitely can.
That bittersweet feeling, Burkeman calls it a bright sadness or a sober joy, that comes with truly recognizing the preciousness, the fragility of your limited time.
It shifts your perspective somehow.
It really does. Instead of thinking that an endless supply of time is the default, the normal state, and that death is this unfair interruption,
You start to see it differently.
you can start to see having any time at all as this incredible, almost miraculous gift. Just being here.
Wow.
The writer David Kane had a really profound experience with this after a shooting in Toronto. He realized that being alive is essentially happenstance, pure chance, and not a single day of it should be taken for granted.
Okay, that lands heavily. So how does this relate back to time management? He goes after that classic rocks in the jar parable, doesn't he?
Oh, he really does. You know the one, put the big rocks, important stuff in first, then the pebbles, then the sand.
Yeah, and supposedly everything fits.
Burkeman argues that for you this is misleading, because in reality, those important but non-urgent things, the big rocks that aren't on fire right now.
Like relationships, deep work, health.
Exactly. They often get completely squeezed out by the urgent but less important sand and pebbles. The model breaks down in practice.
So what's the alternative of them?
Instead, he suggests for you the idea of paying yourself first with time, like you do with savings.
Okay, what does that look like?
Proactively scheduling time, blocking it out for what genuinely matters to you first.
Even if other things don't get done.
Especially if it means accepting that other things will inevitably have to be neglected. It's about making those conscious choices about where your finite attention actually goes.
Choosing your neglects consciously.
Pretty much. He even uses Kafka's famously complicated relationship with Felice Bauer as an example.
How so?
As someone trying to avoid fully embracing the implications of his limited time by always keeping possibilities open, never fully committing, always hedging.
Trying to escape the finitude of choice.
You got it. And this leads to the perhaps uncomfortable, but Burkeman argues ultimately liberating, idea of the inevitability of settling.
Settling it like relationships, career.
In all areas of your life, basically.
Yeah.
You have to choose a path, a partner, a focus, because you can't have them all.
And not choosing is also a choice.
Exactly. The political theorist Robert Gooden makes the point that even actively refusing to settle is itself a form of settling. You're settling for the life of non-commitment.
Huh.
And remember that Harvard psychology experiment with the posters.
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
They found people were actually happier with choices they couldn't reverse.
Yeah.
Once the door was closed, they stopped agonizing and just got on with liking what they'd chosen.
Interesting. Less choice, more happiness sometimes.
It seems so. Okay, let's dive into the fascinating world of attention and distraction for you. This is huge today.
Tell me about it. Feels like a constant battle.
Well, Burkeman argues something quite profound. Your attention just is your life.
Wow. Say more.
What you choose to pay attention to, moment by moment, essentially defines your experience of being alive. That's what reality is for you.
Okay, that makes sense. So distraction is stealing my life.
In a way. But he also says distraction isn't just something being forced on you from the outside, notifications, clickbait.
It's also internal.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It's frequently a way you try to escape the discomfort of the present moment, a flight from reality.
Discomfort like boredom, difficulty.
Exactly. Or that underlying fear of your own finitude we talked about. That unease you might feel when facing your limitations while trying to focus on tasks that are genuinely important but maybe hard.
So it's often easier in the short term to just flit off to something less demanding, more immediately gratifying, like checking email for the 10th time.
Precisely. It's an escape hatch. He brings in the experience of Shinzen Young, a meditation teacher,
Okay.
with this incredibly intense icy purification ritual in Japan. Freezing water, chanting. Sounds awful.
Definitely sounds unpleasant.
But Young found that by focusing completely, utterly on the present physical sensations, the intense cold, the shivering, the suffering actually lessened.
Ow.
Because the real problem, Burkeman suggests for you, isn't always the unpleasant experience itself, but your resistance to it. The mental fight against reality.
So leaning into the discomfort, paradoxically, reduces the suffering.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And what about that desire you might have to control the future? Through constant planning, worrying, strategizing.
Guilty as charged. I mean, isn't planning good?
It can be,
Yeah.
but Burkeman argues that excessive future focus often backfires on you. It actually increases anxiety.
Why?
Because the future is, by its very nature, uncertain and uncontrollable. You're trying to wring guarantees and certainty from something that can never truly provide them. It's a recipe for frustration.
Okay, that hits home. This brings us to another illusion, maybe. The illusion of having time.
Yeah. The writer David Kane makes this really insightful point that you never truly have time in the way you have, say, money in the bank.
What do you have there?
You only ever have expectations about future moments. The present moment is all that's actually real.
And Burkeman connects this to the philosopher Heidegger's profound idea.
That you don't have time, you are time. Your existence is simply this sequence of unfolding moments. You are your 4,000 weeks unfolding.
Wow, okay. It's deep.
It is. And when you think about it like that, your anxiety about the future's unpredictability seems a bit strange when you consider the past, right?
How do you mean?
Think about your life. So much of what you value, relationships, opportunities, experiences, came about through chance encounters, unexpected events, things you could never have possibly planned.
That's true. Serendipity plays a huge role.
Totally. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir apparently marveled at the sheer number of uncontrollable things, pure contingencies, that had to align perfectly for her to even become the person she was.
Right. And yet we try to plan everything meticulously going forward.
Exactly. And how often do you find yourself preparing to experience the present later, instead of actually being present right now?
Uh-oh. Like taking photos instead of looking.
That's the classic example, like those tourists Burkeman mentions at the British Museum, more focused on getting the perfect photo of the Rosetta Stone than actually looking at the Rosetta Stone itself.
Guilty again. Documenting rather than experiencing.
Burkeman calls this the when I finally mindset. When I finally get this project done, when I finally go on vacation, when I finally retire, then I'll really live.
Always postponing authentic engagement to the future.
Yes. The philosopher Alan Watts had this great analogy. He compared much of modern education and career paths to donkeys constantly chasing after carrots tied to sticks just in front of their noses.
Always striving, never arriving.
You're always striving for some future point, some future reward that never actually arrives, because once you get there, the carrot just moves further ahead. You never fully engage with the present journey.
And this applies beyond work too, right? Like in parenting.
Oh, definitely. The writer Adam Gopnik talks about what he calls the causal catastrophe in modern parenting.
Causal catastrophe. Sounds dramatic.
It's this underlying, often unconscious belief that the whole point of childhood is solely to produce a certain type of successful, well-adjusted adult.
As if childhood itself isn't valuable.
Exactly. It completely devalues the actual present experience of being a child. As the Russian writer Herzen beautifully put it, something like, a child's purpose is to be a child. Nature doesn't disdain what only lives for a day. Childhood isn't just prep school for adulthood.
That's a powerful reminder. This future-focused way of thinking really contrasts with the ability to simply enjoy the present, doesn't it?
It really does. It's wonderfully illustrated by that classic parable. You probably know it. The busy New York businessman and the relaxed Mexican fisherman.
Ah, yes. The businessman tells the fisherman how to scale up his fishing, make millions.
Work really hard for decades, invest wisely.
So that eventually one day he can retire to a little coastal village and relax and fish.
And the fisherman just points out, but I'm already doing that.
Exactly. The fisherman is already living the kind of simple, present life the businessman thinks he needs to sacrifice his entire life working towards.
It's a great illustration of the trap.
I even had a personal experience with this once, something you might relate to. Trying too hard to be present.
Oh yeah, tell me.
I remember being in Canada, determined to appreciate the Northern Lights. It was on my bucket list.
Yeah. Big experience.
So I was forcing myself out into the freezing cold every night, staring up, willing myself to have this profound present moment with the aurora.
Trying to capture the experience.
Totally. But the more I tried, the more I focused on having the experience, the less I seemed able to actually just experience it. In the end, I just thought they looked a bit like a fancy screensaver.
Huh. That's brilliant, because that very effort to be present can paradoxically take you further away from the present moment.
How so?
It becomes just another task, another way of trying to instrumentalize your time, this time for some kind of enriching experience or mindfulness goal.
Like trying too hard to fall asleep.
Exactly. The more you try, the more effort you put in, the harder it gets.
Yeah.
Presence isn't really something you achieve through effort.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. Let's turn our attention now to rediscovering rest. Actual rest.
Yeah, because we're not very good at it, are we?
Not really. The take back your time movement Burkeman mentions really challenges this constant need we feel.
To justify our leisure time.
Yeah, to justify it by linking it to future productivity benefits. Why should you always have to argue that taking a vacation will make you a better, more refreshed worker? Can't it just be nice?
It's a good question. Industrialization really created this sharp divide, didn't it? Between work and leisure.
And leisure often got framed as just recovery time.
Pretty much. Just a period of recharging the batteries so you could go back to being productive. But as those 19th century textile workers apparently yearned for,
What did they want?
true leisure wasn't just about not working. It was simply about having time to look around to see what is going on, just being, not some disguised form of self-improvement or work prep. Lafargue wrote The Right to be Lazy around then, too.
The right to be lazy. Radical then. Maybe radical now, too.
Because you've probably inherited this rather strange, pervasive idea that anything you do that doesn't directly create future value, make you fitter, smarter, richer, more connected, is somehow a waste of your precious, finite time.
So just resting, genuinely resting without some instrumental purpose can almost feel wrong, like you're being unproductive or indulgent.
Exactly. Which leads to what Burkeman cleverly calls pathological productivity.
Pathological, okay.
It's that feeling of unease, maybe even actual unpleasantness or anxiety, when you're not actively being productive, when you're idle.
I think I know that feeling.
He uses the extreme work habits of someone like the novelist Daniel Steele as a striking example, writing almost constantly. And sometimes this relentless drive to be productive can actually be a way of avoiding.
Dealing with difficult underlying emotions.
Could be avoidance through busyness. The anxiety many feel around idleness even has deep historical roots, like in ideas around Calvinist predestination, where worldly success was maybe seen as a sign of being chosen. Idleness was suspect.
Wow, okay, so how do we counteract this?
Well, Burkeman highlights the real value of atelic activities.
Atelic, what's that mean?
It means activities done purely for their own sake. Things you do just for the joy of doing them, without any thought of accomplishment, profit, or productivity. Hobbies, basically.
Okay, like what?
Think of someone like Rod Stewart, apparently, with his incredibly detailed, enormous model railway. He just loves doing it. It serves no purpose beyond the enjoyment itself.
Right. It's not about becoming the world's best model railway builder.
Exactly. And being perfectly mediocre at your hobbies, Burkeman suggests, can actually be a source of great fulfillment.
How so? Because it removes the pressure.
Precisely. It removes that constant pressure to use your time well, to optimize, to achieve. You can just potter around and enjoy the process. It's liberating.
I like that. Permission to be mediocre at things you enjoy.
A radical idea. Now, let's consider the power of patience for you. Another thing we're not great at.
Definitely not. Instant gratification roles.
Right. But the Taoist principle of yielding to reality, accepting things as they are rather than constantly fighting against them, really speaks to this.
How does that relate to impatience?
Think about impatience in your own life, like pointless honking in a traffic jam. What does it achieve?
Nothing. Just raises my blood pressure and annoys everyone else.
Exactly. It's resisting the reality of the situation, creating more stress, and achieving absolutely nothing. It doesn't make the traffic move faster.
And all the constant advancements in technology, they can actually make impatience worse, can't they?
Burkeman argues they do, by giving you this illusion that you should be able to transcend your physical limitations, that everything should happen instantly. Faster internet, instant communication. It breeds impatience with things that still take time.
Like growing a plant or learning an instrument or waiting for a bus.
Exactly. He even draws this compelling parallel between this modern addiction to speed and alcoholism, as described by the researcher Stephanie Brown.
Addiction to speed. How?
It becomes this self-defeating cycle where you try to control your anxiety or discomfort by moving faster, by trying to get things over with quicker.
But that just ends up creating more anxiety.
Often, yes, because you're never present, always rushing towards the next thing. The core insight of Alcoholics Anonymous is relevant here too.
Which is?
That you can't truly overcome an addiction until you give up the hope of ever completely beating it, until you surrender to your limitations. It requires accepting you can't perfectly control it.
So applying that to time, maybe accepting you can't control time perfectly is the first step.
Something like that. Surrendering to the reality of your limits. The art historian Jennifer Roberts' exercise at Harvard is a fascinating way for you to think about cultivating patience and deeper attention.
What did she have students do?
She had them spend 3 hours just looking at a single painting.
3 hours? Wow, that sounds hard.
Right. It challenges our usual rushed pace of engagement. But she herself discovered incredible details, nuances, and historical connections in a seemingly familiar Copley painting that she, an expert, had never noticed before, despite looking at it many times.
Just by slowing down and really looking. Patience.
Patience. And M. Scott Peck, the psychiatrist, shared a great little story about fixing his car handbrake.
Okay.
He was getting frustrated, couldn't figure it out, but then he just stopped, sat down, and simply observed how the mechanism worked for a while, patiently. And then the solution became obvious.
So observation plus patience in sight.
Often, yes. It illustrates the practical power of patience in problem solving. Peck also outlines 3 key principles of patience that you might find helpful.
Okay, what are they?
First, developing a taste for having problems.
A taste for problems, like enjoying them.
Not quite enjoying, maybe, but seeing them not as annoying roadblocks, but as inherent parts of life. Even opportunities for growth or learning. Accepting their inevitability.
Okay, shift in perspective. What's second?
Embracing radical incrementalism.
Radical incrementalism.
Yeah, focusing on small, steady, consistent steps over time. Like the research by Robert Boyce on academic writers, the ones who wrote just a small amount consistently every day, were far more productive and less stressed than the binge writers. Slow and steady.
Makes sense. Drip by drip. And the third?
The idea that true originality often lies on the far side of what feels unoriginal.
Unpack that one.
He uses a parable from the photographer Arno Raphael Minkkinen about waiting at different bus stops in Helsinki. All the routes seem the same at first, covering the same ground. But if you stay on your bus long enough,
it eventually diverges onto its own unique path.
Exactly. You have to keep going, putting in the work, even if it feels like you're just retreading old ground for a while, to eventually find your own unique perspective or contribution. Don't jump off the bus too soon, assuming it's going nowhere new.
Stay the course. Patience again. Okay, let's touch on the crucial importance of connection for you. Social connection.
Yes, because the pursuit of individual time freedom can sometimes undermine this. Think about the digital nomad lifestyle.
Right. Sounds appealing work from anywhere. Title freedom.
But Burkeman points out it often leads to a deep sense of loneliness and disconnection. Ironically, traditional nomadic cultures are actually intensely focused on the group, on community ties.
And this modern idea of complete individual control over your time, your schedule, it can actually lead to a loss of synchrony within society, can it?
It really can, making it harder for you to truly connect with others if everyone's on completely different schedules, doing their own thing whenever they want.
He mentions that Soviet experiment, right? With the staggered work week.
Yeah, a total disaster. Designed on paper to maximize factory efficiency by having continuous operation, but it completely destroyed social cohesion because family members, friends, neighbors were never off work at the same time.
Couldn't sync up.
Couldn't sync up. Contrast that with the researcher Terry Hardig's work in Sweden.
What did he find?
He beautifully demonstrated the psychological benefits of synchronized holidays. People reported feeling happier not just from having time off work, but from having the same time off as their fellow citizens. That shared rhythm mattered.
Being in sync feels good.
It does. And the historian William McNeil's experience with military marching drills.
Marching. How's that relevant?
He described this powerful, almost visceral sense of connection, of muscular bonding that's created through synchronized movement and singing together. It dissolves the individual into the group.
Ah, that collective feeling. So, true freedom, Burkeman suggests for you, isn't just about individual autonomy, is it?
No, it's also deeply communal. It involves finding ways to be in sync with others. He encourages commitments that foster synchrony choirs, sports teams, community groups.
Prioritizing things that happen at set times with other people in the physical world.
Exactly. Less optimizing your own schedule, maybe, and more participating in shared ones.
The great pause of the COVID-19 pandemic offered a stark glimpse of this too, didn't it?
It really did. It was a kind of possibility shock, revealing some of what our busy, fragmented pre-lockdown lives were actually lacking.
And the trade-offs we had unconsciously made for convenience or efficiency.
You might remember seeing clearer skies in car-free cities, or experiencing acts of neighborly kindness that maybe there hadn't seemed to be time for before. That shared experience, even in crisis, brought some connection.
But it also serves as a reminder, maybe, to be wary of paralyzing grandiosity. What does he mean by that?
When you start thinking about what matters most in your limited time, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, like you have to do something huge, world-transforming.
And then you do nothing because it feels too big.
Exactly. Paralyzed by the scale.
Yeah.
A meaningful life isn't solely about undertaking these massive projects. Small, consistent actions matter too.
So maybe lower the stakes a bit.
Burkeman introduces this almost humorous but actually quite helpful idea of cosmic insignificance therapy.
Cosmic insignificance therapy. Tell me more.
It's about finding a sense of relief, even freedom, in acknowledging your relatively tiny, fleeting role in the grand, vast scheme of the universe and cosmic time.
How is that freeing?
It can free you from the immense crushing pressure to constantly be remarkable, to leave some indelible mark on the world, to use your 4,000 weeks perfectly. You're a tiny speck. It's okay.
Okay, I can see how that might lower the pressure. It's about accepting and maybe even embracing your actual self, right?
Okay. Yeah, with all your strengths, weaknesses, quirks, and limitations, rather than constantly striving for some impossible, optimized, perfect, ideal self.
He poses some really important questions for your own self-reflection then, doesn't he?
He does. Like, how would you spend your days differently if you truly accepted your limitations, your finitude?
Okay.
And how would you spend your days differently if you didn't care so much about seeing your actions reach some grand long-term fruition within your own lifetime?
Wow. Those are big. There was that documentary too, A Life's Work.
Yes. Profiling individuals dedicated to these incredibly long-term projects, like building a clock to run for 10,000 years, or preserving endangered languages projects they knew they wouldn't see completed.
And they found meaning anyway.
They found deep satisfaction and joy in the process itself, in contributing to something bigger than themselves, even without expecting to see the final outcome.
Working for the work's sake.
Exactly. And the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron's concept of getting the hang of hopelessness ties in here too.
Hopelessness, that sounds bleak.
It sounds it, but it's not about despair. It's about recognizing, truly accepting that things aren't ever going to be perfectly okay in the sense of achieving complete security, predictability, and control. Life is inherently messy and uncertain.
And accepting that is freeing.
Paradoxically, yes. That very realization can be incredibly energizing. It frees you from chasing impossible guarantees and allows you to focus on what you can do, how you can act in the present moment within the messy reality.
Okay, lots to think about. So let's bring it down to earth. What are some practical tools or shifts in mindset Burkeman suggests for you to cultivate this different relationship with time?
Right, the what can I actually do
Yeah.
part. First, and maybe most importantly, give yourself permission right now to let go of the impossible quest.
The quest for the absolute, optimized, perfectly efficient self.
Exactly. It's unattainable. Stop beating yourself up about it.
Okay, permission granted. What else?
Consciously choose your battles. Decide where you do want to focus your finite capacity for care and attention. You can't care equally about everything. Focus your energy.
Be selective about what you engage with. Makes sense.
Consider embracing boring, single-purpose technology sometimes.
Boring tech. Like what?
Things that do one job well and don't constantly try to steal your attention. Removing distracting apps, maybe using grayscale mode on your phone, using a dedicated e-reader like a Kindle for reading instead of a tablet full of temptations. Reduce the incoming noise.
Fight distraction by making tech less sticky.
Yeah. Also, try setting fixed volume limits on activities that tend to expand endlessly.
Like email or housework.
Could be. Decide you'll spend, say, 1 hour on email or clean for 90 minutes and then stop, even if it's not finished. Define the container, not the completion.
Okay, boundaries on time spent.
Actively resist the urge to turn every pleasant, enjoyable activity into some kind of obligation or a means to an end. Let hobbies be hobbies. Let rest be rest.
Don't instrumentalize everything.
Right. And practice cultivating instantaneous generosity.
Instantaneous generosity.
When you have that immediate impulse to help someone, send a kind note, offer a compliment, just do it right away. Don't put it on the to-do list where it might never happen. Act on the good impulse now.
I like that one. Simple but powerful.
Explore the practice of do-nothing meditation, as taught by Shinzen Young.
Do nothing. How does that work?
It's incredibly simple. You just sit, maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, and gently notice every time you realize you're doing something, thinking, planning, fidgeting, judging, and just gently acknowledge it and return to just being, not trying to achieve stillness, just noticing the activity.
Interesting. A practice in non-doing.
Exactly. And finally, a mindset shift. Try to reframe busyness in your mind.
How?
See it not as some badge of honor, a sign of importance, but potentially as a problem, a sign that maybe your priorities are skewed or you're avoiding something or you've taken on too much. Question the virtue of busyness.
Okay, challenge the busy is best assumption.
Right. These aren't magic bullets, but they're practical ways to start shifting your relationship with time.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close then, let's circle back to that number, 4,000 weeks.
The average lifespan, it's undeniably finite, short even in the grand scheme of things.
But as Burkeman argues so compellingly throughout the book, that isn't actually a cause for despair or panic.
No, quite the opposite. Instead, it's really an invitation, an opportunity to cultivate a completely different way of relating to the time you have, a more realistic, more meaningful way.
We really encourage you, listening now, to take some time yourself, mull over these ideas.
Yeah, consider how they might resonate with your own personal experience of time, of busyness, of limitation. What rings true for you?
Because ultimately, accepting your limitations, accepting the finite nature of your time, it really can be incredibly liberating.
It frees you up. It allows you to truly focus your precious attention on what brings meaning and connection and joy to your present moment, the only moment you ever actually have.
And with that in mind, maybe here's a final thought for you to consider, something to chew on.
Okay, leave us with something provocative.
Perhaps the most valuable, the most productive way you can spend your limited time isn't in this frantic, doomed attempt to control it, to optimize it, to wrestle it into submission. But maybe it's in simply learning to fully embrace, to fully experience the messy, unpredictable, imperfect, and ultimately precious reality of being alive within it right here, right now.